Okay, we're live. My apologies for the late start here. I'd like to be prompt. Didn't happen today. Welcome to the June 8th, 2023 Legislative Committee on Administrative Rules meeting. And let's see, before we get started here, let's do introductions first. Discussing the agenda, and then we'll do the minute.
Anthea Dexter Cooper from the Office of Legislative Counsel.
Senator Ginny Lyons representing Chittenden Southeast.
Senator Chris Bray from Bristol representing Addison County, Huntington, Hillsborough, and Rochester.
Representative Carol Lee representing Farmington, North End, Burlington.
Representative Seth Baumgartz, Arlington, Manchester, Sandgate, and part of Sunderland.
Representative Mark Higley representing Wall, J. Westfield, Troy, the town of Eden, Irisburg, Coventry, and Newport Town.
Senator Mark McDonald representing Orange County.
Representative Trevor Squirrel representing Underhill and Jericho. Sorry, I'm Bluetoothing my hearing aids here. Over here.
Charlene Dindo, Committee Assistant.
Lindsay Shrine, Administrative Assistant, Legislative Operations.
Welcome, everybody. I'm going to propose a change to the agenda. We spent a tremendous amount of time on Rule 22P28 last meeting, and we'll still probably have a fair amount of time, probably not as much as last time. But in deference to those folks that got bumped from the last meeting, we're moving discussion around Rule 22, or I'm suggesting that we move it 22P28 to the end of the agenda, and everything else will move up in that place. Okay? I make that as a motion.
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, thank you. Next, minutes from May 25. Do I have a motion to approve? With a motion to approve, any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye, those opposed? Okay. Thank you very much. Our first rule today is going to be Rule 23P05, Agency of Human Services Inflation Adjustment for Private Non-Medical Institutions. I believe it's James LaRock. My eyes don't catch spelling up there. Okay, the floor is yours.
Great, thank you. As you said, James LaRock. I'm a staff attorney with the Department of Vermont Health Access. I'm joined today by Jamie Mooney, who's the director of the Division of Rate Setting. First of all, I just want to thank the committee for your flexibility. Really appreciate being moved to the top of the agenda. Very critical that we get these rules in place, so we really appreciate that. We'd also like to thank the Legislative Council for their careful review of the rules. Already spotted a couple of issues that we were able to fix, so we really appreciate that as well. Also, keeping in mind that you guys have other things that you need to get done today, I'll keep this very brief. Just at a very high level, the Division of Rate Setting sets per diem rates for private non-medical institutions who are residential childcare providers for children with special needs. Because of the vagaries of the rate setting process, these are prospective rates based on historical costs. Those costs have tended to be about 2 years old when they're actually paid for them. When inflation was 1 or 2%, we could muddle through. Our providers made do under heroic circumstances, but now recent periods of high inflation have made the need for an inflation adjustment for that per diem rate critical. The Agency of Human Services requested one-time money in the most recent Budget Adjustment Act, as well as in their fiscal asks to have this an inflation adjustment made permanent in the Division of Rate Setting's rules. To our knowledge, that was included in DCF and DMH's overall budgetary asks, and it was approved in the version of the budget that the legislature passed. So this rule is just necessary to make sure that whatever the final budget looks like, obviously we don't have one right now, to make sure that the money that the legislature is going to approve for inflation actually can make it out to providers, because the rule will need to be amended for that. The process is very simple. We're going to calculate one statewide inflation rate based on econometric data about costs in the healthcare sector, childcare sector, room and board, and education. At a certain point in the rate setting process, we're just going to amend that everyone's per diem rate to account for that inflation. We're choosing to do one statewide rate instead of making an individual rate for all of our over a dozen providers for two reasons. First of all, administrative simplification, It would be a huge burden to calculate the inflation that every provider experienced. As well, this makes it an incentive for a provider. If they can keep their increase in costs below the pace of inflation, they're going to be rewarded with more money they can reinvest in their staff and their programs. With that, I would stand for any questions for the committee.
Any members, questions? Senator Lyons.
I'd move that we approve 23P05 inflation adjustment for private non-medical institutions with proposed modifications submitted by the Department of DEVA, Vermont Health Access, in correspondence of May 19th, 2023.
Senator Lyons has a motion to approve from Rule 23P05. Any additional question? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Rules passed. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, the next rule that's on the agenda is Rule 22P29. There was at the last meeting, it was determined that the individual making not the presentation, but someone involved with the rule couldn't be here for that presentation. And so there was a request for extension. We had a conversation at the end of our meeting last time, so we essentially said, fine. But I want to put it on the table for the committee to have any discussion if they wish, and to vote a motion to create that extension to, I believe it's 6/29, correct?
Yeah, it says 6/29.
Okay.
I'll make that motion right off.
And so we'll.
So you're getting an extension until 6/29. You're giving them an extension until July 14th of 2024.
Okay. That's the motion. Yep. Okay.
Your eyes
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, thank you very much. All right, next up is Rule 23E04, Cannabis Control Board Emergency Rule on Synthetic and Hemp-Derived Cannabinoids. And we have Gabriel Gilman. Gabriel Gilman is? Was he Zooming or in person, do you know?
He was here in person for the last meeting. I emailed them before the meeting started to say that the agenda times would be off. It could be that he's walking from the office. So you could go to the stars rule.
That's what we'll do. We're going to move on. Rule 23P02, but do we have Heidi Moreau? Oh, there she is. Department for Children and Families, Step Ahead Recognition System, STARS rules. Heidi, welcome.
Thank you. Good morning. I'm Heidi Moreau, Policy Advisor for the Department for Children and Families. I'm joined here today by 3 Child Development Division staff, Joanna Vassie, a Business Service Specialist for CDD, Chris Case, the Director of Policy and Planning, and Ray Garofano, the Child Care Quality Program Administrator. So the final proposed rule amends the Step Ahead Recognition System known as STARS. STARS is a quality recognition and improvement system that helps parents understand the level of quality in early childhood and after-school programs. The systems are designed to help parents compare different programs by using the same set of standards, and they also help child care providers improve and communicate their quality to parents. CDD engaged extensively with federal and community partners, child care providers, and parents to develop updated criteria for STARS. The biggest change is that the proposed rule replaces the graduated point system and arenas with levels and content areas. And it also provides CDD with greater flexibility to update content areas based on evidence and research within the field. CDD conducted 4 public hearings, 1 in person and 3 virtually. We received 18 comments on the proposed rule. Most of them were seeking additional information or suggestions for additional clarification, but no objections were made to the move away from the fixed graduated point system. And CDD has proposed modifications to the final proposed rule based on feedback from Legislative Council. And these changes are detailed in the letter to the committee dated May 19th, 2023. And we also provided updated, annotated, and clean text based on those changes. And I'm happy to take any questions the committee has.
Mr. Chair, thank you. It was mentioned in some of our information as well, but considering the new childcare bill, S-217, I believe, how do these new standards around the program align with what was in S-217? Have you looked at that at all yet?
Yes, and I'm going to turn to my colleagues from CDD to provide a more in-depth answer to that.
Hi, Ray Garofano for Child Development Division. Thank you for the question, Representative Higley, I believe.
Yeah,
nice to see you again.
Yeah.
So these rules are changing the STARS standards as it relates to quality childcare in the various programs. And the change that H217 is proposing to make is to bring the reimbursement rate for all providers to the 5-star level that currently is received in the current program. Every provider receives a different rate depending on their star rate. So essentially, these will not interfere with what is laid out in H217. And I can defer to Joanna Vasey, who's our content expert on this system, if she has anything to add.
No, I don't.
Hey, no, appreciate that. Thank you.
An alliance.
Thank you, and thanks for being here. We worked a long, hard time on the S56 and then 217. So the proposal that was made by the administration and is in 217 is to have all childcare homes and centers paid at 5-star level. So that you've made that very clear. The proposal that we have here seems somewhat inconsistent with current statute, although it does give you flexibility. And so I'm going to go back to the question that Representative Higley asked again. So how can we rationalize a set payment, assuming that the veto is not sustained? How can we rationalize a system that has the 5-star level for everyone, and then these rules that are going into place? And please, I understand that you've talked about that a little bit, but it would be helpful to have some reinforcement of what you're doing.
Thank you, Senator Lyons. Nice to see you. The STARS rules, the revision is about helping programs achieve standards in quality. So we have a series of supports in place to help programs really improve their quality working with children in the various, I think it's 3 content areas. So if I'm understanding your question correctly, you're wondering about the change from a different incentive program for programs to increase their quality. Is that what you're asking?
Well, 217 does include incentives for folks to move from one step to the next and then a reward for getting there. But my question is about the rules as you're presenting them and how that sort of sugars off with what we currently have.
Well, what we have currently is a point system. that programs have to achieve certain number of points in different arenas. And we're proposing to change the rules so programs work on with supportive programs that are being established to build a continuous quality plan that will help them identify which areas in their program they would like to improve. And they will work with coaches and mentors that are being set up currently to achieve those goals that they set up. So it's taking it away from, checking off boxes for various things to helping programs understand individually in their unique program how they want to achieve better quality and better outcomes for children and help. And then we'll have supportive programs in place to help them achieve those goals and monitor the achievements.
All right, thank you. It'll be interesting, should this go forward without 217, to see how many centers have the capacity to take the next quality step forward without having some resources to do that. So thank you.
Other questions? Motion?
I'll move that we approve 23P02. Was there any modification to that?
There was.
Yeah.
And I think as well.
The STARS rule with proposed modifications submitted by DCF and correspondence dated May 19th. Thank you.
Okay, we have a motion on the table from Senator Lyons to support of Rule 23P02. Any more discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Heidi.
Thank you.
Okay. You have Gabrielle?
Yes, sir.
Oh. All right, we'll go back to Rule 23P04, Cannabis Control Board Emergency Rule on Synthetic and Hemp-Derived Cannabinoids.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Proceed.
Thank you for having me, and I'm sorry, it looks like I missed my call by about 2 minutes before. My name is Gabriel Gilman. I'm General Counsel from the Cannabis Control Board. Now before you is an emergency rule adopted by the board at its April meeting with immediate effect, titled the Emergency Rule on Synthetic and Hemp-Derived Cannabinoids. The basis of the emergency is explained in the concise summary. Essentially, the rule addresses threats to the public health, safety, and welfare created by the unregulated sale of potentially intoxicating synthetic cannabinoids and high THC hemp-derived products. The emergency rule prohibits production, manufacture, marketing, transfer, and sale of these products in Vermont. It sets a 4-trigger test for the presumptive prohibited content based on THC concentration, serving content, net content, and market appeal. And it provides for appropriate exceptions to ensure the emergency rule does not interfere with duly registered cannabis products, with products with utility to a medical patient, and to legend drugs approved by the United States FDA for dispensing upon prescription of a medical provider. Happy to answer any questions that the committee may have. It turned out to be fortunate that we were bumped from the last meeting because that evening we had a public outreach session with, I think, the people that were most concerned about the emergency rule. Those are longstanding hemp producers that went a long way toward promoting understanding of what the rule does and does not cover. So I think as I sit here a bit later, the rule is much more broadly accepted in the community. There's much more understanding of it. It has already been effective at preventing illicit sale in a kind of stand-up, quasi-unregulated retail environment of these kind of synthetic cannabis products.
Okay, thank you. Any questions? Last evening, which is late in the game for us, I received a correspondence from Representative Chestnut Benjamin and Representative Adriano, with some constituents that are in the hemp business, has some concerns about this emergency rulemaking, the impact it is having on their particular business. I only bring that up because they had made a request to us to take some action regarding their concerns. It's my feeling that the permanent rulemaking is underway at this point in time, and that's probably a more appropriate forum for them to take in terms of their concerns around this. And I understand their challenges, but I think that's the best place for them to be. My question is that you are in the process of the permanent rulemaking, and in the case of this emergency rule and its relationship to Rule 2, and the comment period for the permanent rulemaking is technically closed, although I believe it's on your website as accessible right now. But I don't believe you've addressed the emergency rule piece in the permanent rule directly, and whether you would continue to take comment from the public around those concerns.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We absolutely would. As things fell together, as you're kind of alluding to, by pure coincidence, the agency had major updates already in the pipeline to see you, and you will see them in a couple of months or within a couple of months, to its ordinary standing rules. They didn't include this content. The emergency sort of developed after the proposed rule was initiated. It is our sense, of course, that one doesn't want emergency rules just hanging out there in emergency status without public rulemaking and input. So as you alluded to, our intention is to add this to proposed Rule 2, which will come before you shortly. We made this very broadly known in the community. So in fact, when we went to take public comment on the 3 open proposed rules, that public comment was absolutely dominated by discussion of this emergency rule, which was actually not in those. So I feel very comfortable that everyone in the hemp community who wanted to be heard has had that opportunity. It's far and away the largest subject of public comment we've received on the rules, despite the irony of the rule not actually containing that particular text. We've just let folks know it will be there. But for all of these reasons, because of the closeness and small size of that community, we're quite comfortable that everybody in that camp who might really want to be heard almost certainly has had that opportunity. And I can certainly represent to you that we will hold open the receipt of public comment despite the formal expiry of the deadline for at least 1 week forward of today before moving anything, so that ultimately when this committee sees the proposed rule package coming toward it, it will contain any written content that folks want us to submit.
Okay, thank you. Representative Higley.
Mr. Chair, and this is kind of last minute as well, but I see we have some correspondence from Michael O'Grady, Land Council, in regards to this as well, and talking about how even, hemp producers in Vermont must obtain the USDA hemp license. So some of that seems to be out of our control as well. So again, reading what council has said here and so on, I make a motion to approve 23E04, the emergency rule on synthetic and hemp-derived cannabinoids.
There's a motion on the table for Representative Higley. Any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
Thank you. Appreciate your time.
Okay. Last but not least. Rule 22P28, Department of Public Service, Vermont Residential Building Energy Standards. Welcome back.
Good morning. Thank you. I'd like to start by thanking the committee members and staff, legislative council as well, for their continued consideration of this rule and the opportunity to provide some additional information to you in advance of this meeting. As we noted in the letter we sent across last week, this set of updates to the standards is the latest in a process that occurs for the department, updating these standards approximately every 3 years. And the rules, the updates, are designed to ensure the efficient and effective use of energy in residential buildings. They regulate design and construction, of those buildings with anticipated benefits, including reduced energy costs, lower greenhouse gas emissions, and improved indoor air quality. Beyond that, what I think the department really hopes the committee can take away from our submissions is this rule has been carefully developed in consultation with stakeholders and advisors, both in terms of the technical requirements and the practical effects. In addition to that, we hope it's clear that we've heard the concerns that the committee has heard throughout the rulemaking process ourselves, and we've worked very hard to address those concerns in our filings, including making changes in this most recent final proposed rule. So with that, we're happy to provide further detail or answer any questions that you may have.
I'm not sure I have a question. I may. But it's fascinating to me that we have these rules before us that are significant, and we all agree that they're significant and they're important. Did the administration, I know that the administration, I shouldn't say did they, I know that you have worked closely with our committees of jurisdiction going through the process, and yet did you make recommendations regarding anything such as education for folks who may not have the knowledge to carry out residential building code during their construction? Did you make any recommendations regarding any level of enforcement or understanding for folks who are out in the field to have some oversight? Because it seems to me that right now we're seeing this huge volume of vetoes, and yet where we haven't received suggestions during the process that would have made a more collaborative process. And now we're in a rules-making process for residential building codes and hearing concerns from the community of builders. So just wondering whether the administration has stepped forward with any recommendations about education, enforcement, or other.
To your final question there, our role in this process as in statute is to promulgate these rules to update the code. We're limited by that same statute in as far as enforcement. There's a very specific enforcement in quotes mechanism that's written in statute. We all know that that's a major issue, and you heard testimony to that effect. And the legislature has taken a step in the right direction, we believe, by establishing the builder registry. That enables us to at least have a two-way communication with the builder community to raise awareness of the code and hopefully avail the building community of the training opportunities that we have in place that are ongoing and especially focused on East Code updates. We work with our consultants to do code trainings when the new code is implemented. We work with Efficiency Vermont in an ongoing basis and at their annual conference to train builders on the specifics of the new code and the existing code. As far as going beyond that, we don't have the resources to do that. Obviously, we would love to see more awareness, better training, addressing the issues of building science that were raised in the last hearing here. To the extent that we can, we are doing that. So I appreciate the question.
Can I just add one more thing? Kelly Rhonda from the Department of Public Service. The administration did ask the department and departments agreed to look at more carrot, I'll say, for enforcement than maybe the stick. And so one of the things the department agreed to look at, and as part of our energy efficiency utility demand resource plan process that we're in right now, where we set the budgets and goals for energy efficiency utilities, is looking at what additional role the energy efficiency utilities might play in energy code. Specifically, to date, there's not been allowance for energy efficiency utilities to claim any savings from doing energy code work. They do have an energy code assistance center, but they don't, it's part of their budget that doesn't attach any savings. And so the department, as part of this process, is going to look at the new construction programs of the energy efficiency utilities and the possibility of them being able to claim savings from doing education, training, code work, incentives, and that's things which is done in other states. So.
Thank you. Sounds like a STARS program for building.
Representative Hickman.
Mr. Chair, if I could, and I know when you were here last time, you had talked about some of these revisions have been stepped back a little bit because of public hearings, testimony there. But again, I'm looking at the summary of the 2023 standards compared to the 2020. And I want to go down through some of these and you can tell me if they are the ones that have changed, and if not, I guess by looking at some of these, and I think it's important for people out there to hear some of these, is I can't believe that the cost isn't much more significant than what you're suggesting. So when we're talking about higher insulation levels, more efficient mechanical ventilation system, better windows, solar-ready zones, base only, required for the stretch, mechanical ventilation, now requires an efficient, balanced, whole house ventilation system with heat and energy recovery. Electrification includes EV capable requirements to ensure that it will be easy to install EV supply equipment in the future. Requires electric service panels capable of powering the whole home or apartment with all electric end use. Tiny house requirements, which says recognize and add standards for tiny houses. 100% LED lighting. I mean, and the list goes on. Are any of those removed from what the final rule is going to be?
Yes. There was a general category of insulation increases, specifically with regard to walls. We've rolled back the requirements to the existing requirements, so there's no incremental cost as far as the walls, which is a major part of the construction costs. You mentioned solar-ready zones. We've rolled that back as well. That only applies to stretch code at this point, and that's the same as the existing code. The cost effectiveness analysis, which was driving those changes that I just referred to, was done for an average sized new construction home based on feedback from the builder community. We've got cost estimates from consultants, from builders, from RS Means, I believe is the name of the cost estimating Bible for the building industry. We use those numbers as well to come up with a well thought out average incremental cost for a home built to this proposed code as compared to the existing code. So it's only just that incremental cost that we're talking about. You did mention the whole house ventilation system. That, again, what we're comparing is the existing code, which requires a whole house ventilation system, but not a balanced system. So in that case, you would deduct the cost of the existing code, that ventilation system, from the cost of a whole home balanced ventilation system with heat recovery. So the incremental cost is not as great as it would seem from just looking at that one measure, because it's just the incremental cost. That's just one example. So we reviewed and vetted that cost effectiveness analysis to to essentially do the due diligence to make sure that we came up with an accurate average cost, incremental cost for an average new construction home in single family home in Vermont.
Mr. Chair, so the tiny house, which is getting to be quite a thing.
Yeah.
Are there standards already set in place for that, or is that going to be worked on?
No, there was no carve out for tiny homes in the previous code, in the current code. Because as you say, it's a big thing at this point. We wanted to ensure some standard for tiny homes. Obviously, because square footage is of a premium in a tiny home, we couldn't require the same level of insulation, but these homes to start with are very low users of energy. So if the point of the code is to reduce energy use overall for the state of Vermont, homes are a very tiny piece of that. But we did want to ensure some minimum requirement for tiny homes. So we added that to this code.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So wanted to thank the department for your detailed response to requests for more information. It was really helpful to see the whole process you've already been through and where we're at, the different things that have been rolled back in the code, for instance, not changing the wall assembly requirements over current code, things along that line. My sense, based on testimony last time and conversations before last meeting and since last meeting, is that the concerns around education and compliance outreach regulation are part of what's driving, in my sense, the building community's concern. And but that all exists outside of the rule. So I am feeling like we're holding the rule a little bit hostage to a set of reasonable concerns, expectations for education and outreach and compliance or regulation to a need that's really a legislative task. So I'm interested in supporting the rule, but also addressing the building community's need for seeing it paired to a meaningful system of education and compliance. And be open to the idea of seeing us roll forward, the actual implementation date for the rule, but I'm not sure to what degree Lcar normally would play a role, in asking for a delayed implementation. I think I'm looking for a little guidance maybe from council. If that were something that we believed was helpful to all parties, one, to be able to affirm the rule, two, to build in time for the legislature, for instance, maybe to take action. Is that, does that work? Or I'm just trying to figure out what our role, how much we can do here on two fronts.
Yep. So there are two statutory pieces in play. One, under the Administrative Procedures Act, which is generally what covers rulemaking, a rule cannot take effect, a permanent rule cannot take effect until 15 days after it's adopted. And adoption is what happens after Lcar approves the rule, or the 45 days passes, or the agency moves forward with adoption despite the fact that Lcar has objected to a rule. Within the specific statutory framework for the RBs, you have I believe it's 3 months on the delay from when the rule is adopted to when it can become effective. And you've heard testimony that absent Lcar sort of doing anything in this realm or trying to do anything in this realm, their plan was that the rule was going to become effective, I believe, on December 1 of 2023, which gives them time to have the code printed and do outreach there. And it is consistent with both the APA requirements, it's more than 15 days, and consistent with the statutory requirements for the RBs. In the ordinary course, the way that Lcar sees an effective date is if it's in the rule. So sometimes you'll see in a rule effective December 1, 2023, right? In the rule that Lcar is being asked to approve. Sometimes you'll see in rules that rule is effective upon adoption, and I'll politely let the agency know in advance, hey, that's inconsistent with the APA, you need to change that. In some instances, Lcar doesn't see an effective date whatsoever in the text of the rule. It's not required to be there under the APA, and where the effective date is established is in the final adoption paperwork that's filed with the Secretary of State's office. It says, when is the rule effective? And is it, you need to fill in a date that's more than 15 days after adoption. In this case, the effective date is not included. As we talked about at the last meeting, you could certainly approve the rule with the modification that it not be effective until a date in the future. Lcar cannot unilaterally make that change. There would need to be agreement from the department as the adopting entity there. And then I think that's a point of discussion between Lcar and DPS. But you certainly could, consistent with both the APA and the specific statutory requirements around the RBs, have an effective date that was further out in the future than the 15 days required under the APA, the 3 months required under the RBs. Those are floors, not ceilings. And then you are dealing with the language in the statute around the RBs around the prompt piece. It is different for the RBs than the CBs. There's not that 3-year cycle put into the statute. So you are dealing with a different statutory framework when it comes to the cyclical nature of when the updates are made. So hopefully that gives you a lot of information that you can then decide what to do.
No, thanks, very helpful. Senator Lyons helpfully mentioned last meeting the possibility of delaying till March. The challenge I see with March is that to get a piece of legislation seems highly unlikely we could get through both House and Senate and enacted prior to implementation. So I think a more probably reasonable expectation would be to aim for a July 1 day. That also would mean that the rules won't be implemented prior to possible legislation, which could be fairly confusing for people to enact a rule and then pass legislation that might bear on how that rule is implemented. So I guess my question back to the department would be, is the department amenable to a July 1, 24?
Thank you. I think certainly as we discussed in some of the information we sent along, there are some reasons to think about that carefully, but we are certainly, if this is something that the committee feels is appropriate, we certainly think that would be all right.
Yeah, can I say one more thing? Thank you for your flexibility. I mean, I think by rights, I think you are in a position to expect us to simply approve the rule as presented today without extension, based on my sense of how we review rules and have you checked all the boxes necessary and all the rest. The real world side that we're talking about is the awkwardness of not having the legislature, I think, take up a pressing issue that goes hand in glove with this, namely the whole compliance regulation outreach training piece, so that it's a robust rule and a robust, equally robust mechanism for helping the industry know about that rule and consider that rule. So I think I would move that we, sorry, I need to go back to looking at the rule number. Thank you. I would move that we approve Rule 22P28 Vermont Residential Building Energy Standards, the RBs, with proposed modification from the Department of Public Service, and to have an effective date not be earlier than 7/1/24.
So we have a motion from Senator Bray on the table regarding P22, 22, P28. Senator McDonald.
So I'd like to ask the last witness a question. If I may. On the day of implementation, when the sun comes up, how will Vermonters' lives have changed as a result of this new rule?
On the day of the rule becomes effective, all new building starts from that day onward would need to comply with the code by law. So the implications over the long term would be reduced energy use for the homeowners of those new homes for the life of that home, which is upwards of 5-6 decades. Any new additions from that point on that are started from that date on would have to comply with the provisions of the code.
Under the current rule, which is effective now, what compliance is required or must take place? What is the consequence of not following the current implemented rule?
That's the crux of the compliance issue that we've been discussing. So the way in statute RVs and CVs work is that the code is required by law. You're required to build new construction and additions to the code by law, but the only recourse to a homeowner that believes their home has been built substandard, not to code, is through the civil court, and I'm not really qualified to talk about it beyond that.
I'll try to clarify a little bit. There's a self-certification process under RVs right now, which means that I believe, right, if you're the builder, you need to sign a certification which says this house has been built in compliance with RVs. Towns can require that certificate as part of their certificate of occupancy. That doesn't have to be a requirement. It's sort of up to the town. Is that?
No.
I'm sorry.
It's required if a town.
I'm sorry, that's right.
If a town has a certificate of occupancy, they must get the certificate before they issue it. But not all towns require a certificate of occupancy.
That's what I meant to say. I'm sorry. Yes.
Sorry to interrupt
So
you.
if the town requires a certificate of occupancy, the RV certificate is required as part of that. You also have, as Keith mentioned, a sort of civil suit provision which says that any person aggrieved for not complying with the RVs can bring a suit in civil court for damages.
What's the statute of limitations on that?
6 years, I believe.
There's no statute.
I didn't hear what she said, and
Excuse me, I'm Sandy Vitztune, and
You can wait for me to recognize you. Would you like to speak?
sorry.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead.
Go ahead. Just stand right there.
I'm so sorry. I am Sandy Vitztune. I'm an architect, and I'm hoping to be able to speak a short tiny bit at the end of testimony from public service. To answer the question, there is no statute in the state of Vermont for construction defect. There's no statute of limitation at all.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, for many of us to go back to the first time we heard, rules was, I think was the golden rule. And that's sort of a self-certifying rule, I believe. How is this any different?
Well, I think, self-certification is how it's set up in statute currently. And certainly, I think you know, the stakeholder community has identified reasons why there might be, you know, benefits in additional assistance for compliance. But that is sort of the current process.
I'm wrestling with, as a lawmaker that implements laws or seeks to that have standards. I know we have speeding laws and, you know, you can't, there are all sorts of things we can't legally do. And this law proposes that you can't build a house for someone else that fails to meet these standards. And I'm still trying to understand why we would be certifying a rule to carry out a law that doesn't seem to be enforceable.
Well, I suppose part of my answer would be that the statute requires the rule. You know, certainly that's why the department undertakes the rule update. You know, and we have obviously energy goals that we're trying to meet in the state as well, and the rules are in service of that. You know,
So what I hear you saying is we, the lawmakers, made you come up with this rule.
correct. Not this rule per se, but a rule. A rule.
And we would have to search amongst ourselves as to why we did that and what we hope to achieve by that, which of course you can't answer because we have to. So it strikes me as an aspirational rule that has been created because the law called for it to be created.
And I think it certainly is followed by a great number of people. And there are a great, you know, it's certainly not something that has had no impact.
I wish I could say a great number of people obey speed limits. So I've served on this committee for a while, and to be voting to put in place an aspirational law, which, like the golden rule, sounds pretty darn good. But when it takes place, are citizens of the state going to rejoice in the advancement of what?
Well, when it takes effect, every new home, you know, that's built should be built to a higher standard, providing, you know, better efficiency, and that's certainly the goal and the intent of the rule.
And the consequences are, when the rule is not followed,
You are subject to potential civil action, and I'd have to do a little more looking into other potential consequences, but.
I'd just like to add that you're pointing out very clearly the issue that's been raised by the building community, the architectural community, our advisors, and that we've addressed, I think, in our responses to Senator Bray's questions. The enforcement piece, I mean, the code without a significant enforcement piece is not being complied with. So if the goal is compliance with this code, which I think we all agree, and this is the reason we put this effort into having an energy code, then we need to deal with that compliance piece. And part of that may be a different enforcement mechanism.
so we're raising the level of non-compliance?
It would seem that way from the statistics that we found in studies, yes.
I think that sort of speaks for itself. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Representative Bongartz.
I just want to chime in a little bit here. I appreciate the work of the department in coming up with the rule and all the, what I know is a ton of effort going into it. But part of our job is to listen to testimony as well. And I think we've heard pretty compelling testimony from both the building community and this letter that we have from the architects on May 17th that I've been looking at, that the issues run deep enough that the potential for doing more harm than good is real here. And Senator Bray mentioned a couple of the issues. The other one is that it literally can do more harm than good if not installed properly. And I think the odds of that happening appear to be, there seems to be real concern about that, and we end up damaging houses and it really is not the fault of the department, and so I want to be clear about that. It's the statute needs some work. The underlying statute needs some work. That both the combination of training and enforcement that then actually ensures that we don't. That's the part that scares me the most, is that people are going to try to do this, not do it right, and actually do more harm than good to the buildings that they're building. Maybe it's within their reach to not do that. But it doesn't seem to, I worry that's not going to happen. So I would be very much in favor of delaying this until July 1 of 24. I think it's, I think part of our job is to, as we do in committees, is listen to the testimony. And I realize we don't have the authority, so I doubly appreciate the department's willingness to help us respond in a way that we feel is appropriate. So thank you for that. And I'm in favor of July 1, 24.
Thank you. Senator Bray.
Yeah, so, I think this is not a new topic, and we've talked about it before in committee and out, and RVs have come up before, and conversations like this have happened before. And my hope is that by taking the unusual step of delaying and perhaps also sending a letter to committees of jurisdiction flagging the issues so that we'll have formally sort of done a baton pass that will make the most of an awkward situation where I feel like there has been resistance in I'd say, all the way around in the building community, at some in the administration and some of the legislature to sort of thrash this out and create a more workable system. So I'm feeling like we're all in this together, and I think the delay would, as a member of a committee of jurisdiction, I'm very interested in committing to taking this up in a timely way so that we don't slide to the next round of RBs and have the same situation perpetuated. I don't know. Of course, I can't say that we'll succeed but I think we should all address it because it'll be helpful to all parties. So I appreciate the department's willingness to take the unusual step of delaying such a long delay in implementation.
So parliamentary or Senate Chair.
Yes, go ahead.
So if we delay the implementation, if we wanted to not have it be implemented, we'd have to vote no today on this motion. Is that correct?
So the motion that's on the table is to approve the rule with the proposed modifications, and I don't know if there actually were any proposed modifications. So you'd be approving the rule as it is presented to you with the effective date not be earlier than July 1 of 2024. If that motion fails, I think you would still need to have a vote, if Lcar so chose, on whether or not you wanted to approve the rule. If Lcar doesn't take action to approve the rule, then the department can move forward with adoption once the 45 days is up. Lcar could also have a vote on whether or not to object on the grounds that Lcar can object to.
So, but if we vote yes on this, the discussion's over? The Lcar discussion is over.
Yes, you will have approved the rule and it will become effective on July 1 of 2024. I think they certainly could go through the rulemaking process again between now in July 1, 2024 to change that. But they would be moving forward with the process with the Secretary of State's office to officially adopt the rule. I assume they would start the process to get the code printed. It would just have an effective date of July 1, 2024.
So, Mr. Chair, we were going to call on someone else, so go ahead. My question will eventually be to the witnesses. If we vote yes, will they be setting about making some changes to the rule before the effective date? So,
Senator Lyons, then we'll come back to your question.
Yeah, thank you. That's a good question, Senator. I won't ask it. I'll save it for you. You've brought up the notion, and we've all talked about, well, the legislature has told us to do it, so we've done it, and that's it. And it's concerning to me that we don't hear back, and I don't know whether the committees of jurisdiction hear back about the glitches in the system. So there are significant glitches in this system. There's no enforcement. Education is spotty, particularly outside of Chittenden County, as we've heard from the architects. Well, there's problems, and there have been problems for a long time, and obviously pandemic hasn't helped with that. However, I think it's really critical that we understand this is not a legislative problem alone. This is, we're all in this together, and Senator Gray has alluded to that. We're a democracy, we're not an army. We don't just follow orders, we do the work together. So I will support the motion, but I just want to put on the table that we need to work together. We need to avoid the vetoes that we see all the time. That sounds political, Mr. Chair, but it's concerning to me that we don't have that collaborative environment, and I'd like to see it happen. We've heard from the builders, we've heard from the architects, we hear from you that there are problems. So let's send it to the place it belongs and have a robust discussion in our committees of jurisdiction. So, thank you.
I will mention one thing, S100, which is a housing bill, which was signed by the governor, does have Building Energy Code Study Committee in there, and I believe they're producing a report by the end of this year. Is that correct, Senator Bray?
Yeah, first meeting by July 15 of this year, and then a report by the end of the year to basically address this very issue and set us up to work on it next session. So we do have a running start. I don't think I would have proposed a delay without just based on sort of hope that we'd actually set in motion a process to help us sort this out.
I also believe, I understand, and I don't know the details around this, that there was a application for a Department of Energy grant of around $4 million. I assume it would come from the Department of Public Service or not?
It did not come from us.
Energy Futures Group
Okay.
put that in, and we're supposed to hear back. My understanding is you're supposed to hear back from the Department of Energy.
I can address that if that's helpful.
Oh, hi, Richard. I think you're there.
Yes.
You want to speak to that quickly?
Richard Fazy with Energy Futures Group. We took the lead on submitting a $4+ million grant to the Department of Energy. It made it through the first round, and we've responded to comments along the way. We should hear a final decision if DOE sticks to their schedule by the end of June. So within the next month or so, we're supposed to hear back, and that would provide resources for all of the things we've been talking about this morning, including helping the state set up a compliance and administration process for energy code, robust training, a couple full-time, 3 full-time people to do training throughout the state, and supporting whatever the system is that we decide to put in place. So we will hear back by June 27th if DOE follows their schedule.
Thank you.
And just on behalf of the department, I did want to say we are certainly planning on being active participants in conversations under S100 DOE grant moving forward to think about the best solutions to this situation that the committee is clearly identifying that we see as well. So certainly that's not something we're trying to put to the side, but it isn't fully within the scope of this rulemaking.
Senator Bray?
Yeah, just a little more on S100. So I know that I've already been in touch with the Pro Temp's office, which is helping coordinate the committee on committees. I believe appointments have already been made for the Senate nominees to that panel yesterday. So we're jumping in.
Any more questions?
Senator McDonald's question.
I think it's been answered.
Okay.
Business as usual.
We have a motion on the table from Senator Bray to approve Rule 22P28 with modifications with.
I don't think there are any proposed modifications, so I think it's just to approve the rule.
So even though it's said here with the proposed modification. Oh, the effective date. Okay. So the effective date being no earlier than July 1, 2024. Okay, that's the motion. Move forward. Yeah. Representative Odie.
Thank you.
Yeah, if I could just make a last comment.
Okay.
I think I mentioned this to Senator Lyons and others as well, and I appreciate what the study committee is going to do, but my experience with what happens in this place is creating some behemoth of a compliance and enforcement regime. And I think that's where you may get into a conflict with, whether it's a veto or whatever, but that may be something that I can't even support. So again, looking at some of the other legislation that was looked at this past year, looking at as many as 65 new state employees, it's a concern for me, and I'll be very interested and hopefully have some input along the way as to what that's going to look like.
Senator Bray.
If I may, in response to Representative Higley, in the words of a former House member, we'll burn that bridge when we get to it.
Okay. Any more discussion?
I didn't hear what you said. I'm sorry. Could you repeat that? I just wanted to hear it.
It was a quasi joke. We'll burn that bridge when we get to it.
No more discussion. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed?
No.
So we have 6-1-1. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
It's a tension-filled conversation. Certainly a lot of challenges ahead. I look forward to seeing everyone collaborate and try to work towards finding solutions for these problems. Thank you, everyone. I don't believe we have anything else on the agenda, so this